The first sensation was the smell. Antiseptic. Cold and sharp. It scraped the inside of his nose. The second was the rhythmic, maddening beep of a machine somewhere to his left. He forced his eyelids open. The light a searing white pain. The ceiling was a sterile, unfamiliar grid. He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt foreign, weak and unresponsive, like borrowed clothes that didn't fit. A man in a crisp white coat stood at the foot of the bed, his face a mask of professional concern. Beside him stood Wang Shui, his son, his face etched with a grief so profound it seemed to have aged him a decade overnight. But why was Shui looking at him with such despair? He was fine. A little disoriented. Perhaps, but fine. Shui, he croaked, intending for his voice to carry the familiar weight of paternal authority. Instead, a thin, reedy sound escaped his lips. Wang Shui's head snapped up, his eyes widening in disbelief. Joa, can you hear me? Doctor, he spoke. Joa. The name echoed in the hollows of his mind. Joa was his grandson, a bright, energetic boy. He turned his head. A slow, agonizing motion, and saw his reflection in the dark screen of a powered-down television. Staring back was not his own weathered, formidable face, the face of a man who had built an empire from dust, but the pale, gaunt face of a teenager. His grandson's face, the world fractured. A torrent of memories, not his own, flooded him. The laughter of children at a birthday party, the slick feel of a polished marble floor, a sudden, jarring slip, and then an explosion of pain at the back of his skull before an all-consuming darkness. Then, another set of memories. His memories crashed in. The icy smile of his wife, Yan Liu, as she handed him a glass of wine. The predatory glint in the eyes of his stepson, Wang Shuing, as he reviewed a contract. The screech of tires on a dark, rainy night. The sickening crunch of metal and bone. Betrayal, murder. He was Wang Zheng, patriarch of the Wang conglomerate. And he was dead. Yet, he was here, trapped in the broken body of his grandson, Wang Joa, who had been declared brain dead after a tragic fall. It's a miracle. Shui was sobbing, clutching the boy's hand. My son, you're back. The doctor cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. His vitals are stabilizing, Mr. Wang. However, the personality changes. The confusion is likely a form of cognitive impairment from the severe head trauma. We must be prepared for a long and difficult recovery. Wang Zheng, now Wang Joa, closed his eyes. Grief, hot and suffocating, washed over him. Grief for the grandson who was truly gone. Grief for the life that had been stolen from him. But, beneath the grief, a cold, hard ember began to glow. Resolve. He was alive. Yan Liu and Wang Shuing thought they had won. Thought they had inherited his kingdom. They were wrong. He would take it all back. A week later, Wang Jia stood before the imposing marble facade of the global Sterling Trust Bank. He had discharged himself against medical advice, using the doctor's diagnosis of cognitive impairment as a shield for his strange, adult-like focus. He wore a threadbare tracksuit and worn-out sneakers, clothes his son had brought to the hospital, believing they were all the boy owned. He looked like a stray, insignificant and easily dismissed. It was the perfect disguise. As he stepped toward the revolving glass doors, a burly security guard blocked his path, his face a sneer of practiced contempt. Word there, kid. This isn't a playground. Get lost. Joa met the man's gaze, his eyes holding a chilling stillness that was utterly incongruous with his boyish face. I have business here. The guard laughed. A short, ugly bark. Business, what? You're here to deposit your allowance. Look at you. You're just another piece of useless trash trying to get a glimpse of how real people live. Now beat it before I throw you out. The pop runs in the opulent lobby, dressed in tailored suits and designer dresses, shot him glances of irritation and disgust. The humiliation was a physical thing, a prickling heat on his skin. In his past life, a single phone call would have had this man fired, blacklisted, and begging on the street. The old Wang Zheng simmered with quiet, volcanic rage. But he held his ground, his composure absolute. "I'm here to access safe deposit box A778, Zhou stated, his young voice laced with an inexplicable authority that made the guard pause. "The booking number is KILIN8802 ECHO. He recited the alphanumeric string flawlessly, a code known only to a handful of the world's most elite and anonymous kinds. It was a failsafe, a ghost account he had created decades ago for a day he hoped would never come. The guard's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. The commotion had attracted the attention of the bank manager, a portly man whose suit was stretched taut across his belly. He bustled over, his expression annoyed. "What is the problem here? Remove this child. He's spouting nonsense about an elite account." The guard grumbled. "The number," Zhou repeated, his gaze now fixed on the manager. "Verify it." The manager sighed, pulling out a tablet with a flourish of impatience. He punched in the code, his fingers flying across the screen. Then he froze. His face went from pink to white to a sweaty mottled grey. His eyes darted from the tablet to Zhou's face, wired with a terror that bordered on religious awe. The Killen series was a legend within the bank, an account with assets rumored to be vast enough to destabilize a small nation. Its owner a complete mystery. My sincerest apologies, sir," the manager stammered, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched his knees. "I'm a fool. We were blind. Please, forgive our ignorance. This way to the VIP suite." He practically shoved the stunned guard aside, ushering Zhou forward with a deference typically reserved for royalty. The whispers in the lobby died, replaced by gaping mouths and shocked stares. The reversal of fortune was swift and brutal. As they passed the security guard, Zhou stopped. He didn't raise his voice. "He didn't need to, he said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of a death sentence. The guard flinched, refusing to meet his eyes. "Kneel," Zhou commanded. The manager's blood ran cold. The guard stared, his mouth agape. "What? He called me useless trash," Zhou said to the manager, his tone conversational, yet deadly. "He represents your bank. Is that the service Global Sterling Trust provides to its most valued clients? Perhaps I should move my assets elsewhere." Panic seized the manager. "Do it," he hissed at the guard. "Apologize to the gentleman. On your knees. Now." Trembling, the guard sank to the polished marble floor. The sound of his knees hitting the stone echoed in the silent lobby. "I'm sorry, sir. I was wrong. Please, forgive me." Wang Zhou looked down at the humiliated man, a flicker of his old, ruthless self gleaming in his young eyes. This was only the beginning. He was a ghost in a borrowed shell, but his power was real, and he would use it to claw his way back from the grave and make his betrayers pay for every last thing they had taken from him. The scent of damp plaster and cheap disinfectant clung to the air in the cramped apartment, a constant, clawing reminder of their fall from grace. A single fluorescent tube on the ceiling flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that made the peeling wallpaper look like weeping souls. Wang Zhou, still grappling with the physical limitations of his grandson's body, sat on the edge of a lumpy sofa that doubled as his bed. He watched his father, Wang Shui, move about the tiny kitchenette with a forced, brittle energy. Every movement was an apology, every tired smile was a shield. "Ah, Zhou," Wang Shui said, his voice straining for a cheerfulness that felt hollow in the small space. "The doctor said you need rest. If only we could afford the private rehabilitation facility. They have the best equipment, He turned away, busying himself with a pot on the stove, his shoulders slumped in a silent admission of failure. Zhou's gaze hardened. He saw not just a son struggling, but a good man broken by betrayal. Yan Liu and his stepson, Wang Shuing, hadn't just stolen a company. They had methodically dismantled a life, stripping Wang Shui of his assets, his reputation, and his dignity, leaving him with nothing but this suffocating little box. The old CEO's spirit raged within him, a silent tempest fury. This was his son, the child he had neglected in his relentless pursuit of power, now paying the price for his enemy's greed. The guilt was a physical weight, heavier than the lingering weakness in his new limbs. "It's fine, father," Zhou said, his voice soft, the tone of the young man he now inhabited. "Being here with you is better than any hospital." Wang Shui turned back, a genuine, watery smile touching his lips. He carried a steaming bowl to the rickety table. The rich aroma of chicken soup, a luxury in their current state, filled the room. With painstaking care, he used a pair of chopsticks to pick out every piece of tender meat from the broth, placing them into a separate, smaller bowl for Zhou. "Here," he said, pushing the bowl of meat towards his son. "You need the protein to rebuild your strength. It's good for your recovery." He then sat down with the bowl of broth and two plain, pale steamed buns. "What about you?" Zhou asked, his eyes fixed on the meager meal. Wang Shui waved a dismissive hand, already biting into a bun. "Don't worry about me. My doctor says I need less fat. Broth and buns are healthier for an old man." The lie was so transparent, so painfully selfless. It pierced Zhou's heart with an unfamiliar ache. It was the love of a father, pure and unconditional. In his previous life, as the titan of industry, he had commanded loyalty through fear and fortune. This quiet, desperate love was a force he had never truly understood. He picked up his chopsticks, the resolve solidifying within him like tempered steel. He would not just reclaim his empire for himself, he would burn Wang Shuing's world to the ground for what he had done to this man, for his father. He had just brought the first piece of chicken to his lips when the apartment door shuddered violently. A deafening crack echoed through the room as the cheap lock splintered, and the door flew open, slamming against the interior wall. 3 large, menacing men filled the doorway, their bulk making the tiny apartment shrink to the size of a closet. They were led by a man in a tight, shiny suit named Leng, whose smirk was as cheap as his cologne. His eyes, cold and predatory, scanned the room before landing on Zhou. "Wang Zhou," Leng said, his voice a low sneer. "We have some business to discuss." Wang Shui shot to his feet, placing his frail body between the intruders and his son. "Who are you? Get out of my home," Leng chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He stepped inside, his thugs fanning out behind him, their presence sucking all the air from the room. "We're here on behalf of Chairman Wang Shuing. He feels sorry for your situation. He knows you're struggling." He pulled a folded document and a cheap pen from his inner pocket, tossing them onto the table. They landed next to the bowl of chicken with a soft thud. "He's offering your way out. A fair transaction." Zhou's eyes flickered to the document. "A share transfer agreement. A fair transaction," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "That's right," Leng said, leaning his knuckles on the table. "Your remaining 5% of Wang Corporation shares. He's willing to give you $200 for the lot." A gesture of goodwill. The insult was so brazen, so utterly contemptuous. It was almost laughable. 5% of the conglomerate was worth billions. 200, Wang Shui gasped, his face paling with rage and disbelief. "You're thieves, that's my son's inheritance. We will never sign, old man. This isn't a negotiation." One of the thugs growled, stepping forward. He grabbed Wang Shui by the arm and shoved him hard. Wang Shui stumbled backward, crashing into a small bookshelf. Books and cheap trinkets rained down around him as he crumpled to the floor with a pained grunt. "Father!" Joe cried out, a surge of adrenaline momentarily overriding his body's weakness. He tried to stand, but another thug pushed him back down onto the sofa with a heavy hand on his shoulder. Leng crouched beside the fallen Wang Shui, his smile widening. "You see, your son is still weak. He can't protect you, but you can protect him. Just tell him to sign." When Wang Shui only glared back in defiance, Leng sighed theatrically. "Have it your way." He nodded to his man, who drew a gleaming utility knife from his pocket. The blade clicked open, its sharp edge glinting in the flickering light. He pressed the cold steel against Wang Shui's forearm, not enough to break the skin, but with a pressure that promised pain. Wang Shui winced, his breath catching in his throat, but his eyes remained fixed on Joa, filled with a desperate plea not to give in. The sight of that blade against his father's skin shattered Joe's composure. The cold, calculating CEO vanished, replaced by a primal need to stop the threat. This was his son, his family. "Stop," Joa said, his voice cracking. "Stop. I'll sign." Leng's triumphant grin spread across his face. "Wise choice," he gestured, and the thug withdrew the knife. "Now, sign the papers, and we can all go about our day." The thug holding Joa down released his shoulder. Leng pushed the agreement and pen across the table. For a moment, a suffocating silence fell over the room, broken only by Wang Shui's ragged breathing. Joa reached out a trembling hand, his fingers hovering over the pen. He could feel Leng's smug satisfaction, the thug's impatient energy. They thought they had won. They thought he was a broken, terrified boy. He let his fingers brush the pen, a deliberate, agonizing delay. Just one more second. He just needed one more second. As his fingertips finally closed around the plastic casing of the pen, his gaze remained downcast. But his mind was a whirlwind of cold, precise calculation. His thumb found the underside of the worn wooden table, pressing firmly on a tiny, almost invisible button, a silent alarm he had installed weeks ago. A desperate contingency for just this moment. "Come on, Long Yi," he thought, the name a silent prayer to the one man from his past who still held absolute, unwavering loyalty. "Pick up the signal. It's time." The air in the cramped apartment was thick with the stench of cheap cigarettes and stale arrogance. Leng, a mid-level manager whose ambition far outstripped his loyalty, sneered, gesturing with a lit cigarette at the two thugs flanking him. They were crude instruments, all muscle and menace, and they watched Wang Joa with the predatory stillness of wolves sizing up a lamb. "The documents, kid," Leng repeated, his voice slick with contempt. "Sign over your grandfather's shares. Wang Shuing is the future of Songyuan Group. You're just a relic." Joa remained impassive, his gaze level. Inside, the spirit of Wang Jinhua, a titan of industry, seethed at the insolence. This weasel, who once bowed and scraped for a promotion, now stood ready to threaten his grandson, his new vessel. He had to play this carefully. One wrong move and his grand plan would crumble before it began. "And if I refuse?" Cha asked, his voice betraying none of the old man's fury, only the calm curiosity of a teenager. Leng chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Then my friends here will have to persuade you." "A fall down the stairs. Perhaps it wouldn't be the first time you've had a serious accident." The threat hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Just as one of the thugs took a step forward, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the door. Once, twice. It wasn't the tentative rap of a neighbor. It was a summons. The thugs froze. Leng's sneer faltered. "Who the hell is that?" he hissed, annoyed by the interruption. Before he could answer, The door swung inward. Framed in the doorway was a man who seemed to absorb all the light in the room. He was in his late 50s, with a posture as straight as a steel rod and a face carved from granite. His simple black suit was impeccably tailored, and behind him stood 4 more men. Silent and disciplined, their presence a stark, professional contrast to Leng's hired muscle. The temperature in the room plummeted. "Uncle Long Yi," Jia said, his voice ringing with a familiarity that made Leng's blood run cold. Long Yi, a man whose name commanded respect and fit in equal measure across the city's corporate and underworld circles, stepped inside. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the scene. The 2 brutes, the smug manager, and the young man he was sworn to protect. He gave Joa a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Leng's face went white. He scrambled to his feet, stubbing out his cigarette in a frantic motion. "And Mr. Long, what a surprise. We were just having a chat with the young master." He forced a laugh that died in his throat. He tried to deny any connection, any knowledge. "I don't know this kid. We must have the wrong apartment." Joa let out a small, humorless smile. "Don't you, Leng? You seemed to know me quite well a moment ago. You were just explaining the terms of my retirement." Long Yi's gaze settled on Leng, and in that gaze was a profound disappointment. He didn't see the boy Wang Jia. He saw the shadow of his old friend, his benefactor, Wang Jin Hua. The same unwavering confidence, the same steel in the eyes. It was an echo of the patriarch he had served for 30 years. To find this petty traitor threatening the old master's only grandson was an unforgivable offense. "Leng." Long Yi's voice was low, a gravelly rumble that promised consequences. "You have served the Wang family for 12 years. Did you think your treachery would go unnoticed? Did you think you could lay a hand on Wang Jinhua's blood and face no repercussions?" Leng began to tremble, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Long, it's a misunderstanding. Wang Shuing, he ordered me." Silence. The word was not shouted, but it cracked like a whip. Long Yi gestured to his men. "You know what to do." As 2 of his men moved toward Leng's thugs, Joa held up a hand. "Wait." All eyes turned to him. The authority in that single word was undeniable. "Breaking arms and legs is messy," Joa said, his voice cool and measured. He was no longer a boy, a general commanding his troops. It sends a message of brutality. I prefer a message of control. Just teach them a lesson they won't forget. Let them walk away, so they can tell everyone what happens when you cross the Wang family. He then looked directly at the terrified Leng. As for him, strip him of everything. His position, his assets. Make sure he can't even get a job sweeping streets in this city. Wang Shuing's little scheme to consolidate shares dies with him. Long Yi stared at the young man for a long moment, a flicker of awe in his hardened eyes. It was the tempered wisdom of his old friend, the perfect balance of mercy and absolute power. He nodded curtly. "As you wish, young master." The thugs were dispatched with swift, brutal efficiency, enough pain to sear a lesson into their bones, but no lasting damage. Leng was dragged out, his pleas and whimpers dissolving into the hallway, his corporate life effectively over. The apartment was suddenly quiet again, the threat neutralized, the first crucial piece of Joa's counterattack firmly in place. Days later, the grand lobby of the Zongyuan Group headquarters gleamed under the recessed lighting. The vast expanse of polished Italian marble reflected the hurried movements of executives and the serene green of towering indoor plants. In the center of this opulent stage, Kiki pushed a mop, her movements rhythmic and weary. The sleek, tailored uniform of a chief assistant had been replaced by the drab, ill-fitting grey coveralls of the cleaning staff. Her demotion had been swift and public. A clear message from the new chairman, Wang Shuing. It was a daily humiliation, a constant reminder of her fall from grace. Yet, as she worked, her expression remained one of stoic resolve. Her loyalty to the late Chairman Wang and his grandson was a flame they hadn't managed to extinguish. The whisper of the automatic glass doors announced an arrival. Wang Shuing strode in, flanked by a sycophantic entourage of junior executives. He was basking in his newfound power, his designer suit a blatant display of wealth and his smile a mask of predatory charm. He saw Kiki immediately, and the cruel glint entered his eyes. He stopped directly in her path, forcing her to halt. His followers smirked. Well, well. Look what we have here, Wang Shuing said, his voice loud enough for half the lobby to hear. From taking my minutes to cleaning my floors, a significant improvement in your usefulness. I'd say Kiki's knuckles turned white on the mop handle, but she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. He took a bottle of water from one of his aides, unscrewed the cap, and with a deliberate, theatrical gesture, poured a steady stream onto the spotless floor right in front of her feet. The water splashed against her worn shoes. The entourage chuckled. Oops, Wang Shuing said with mock surprise. Looks like you missed a spot. Clean it up. She bit her lip. The taste of blood a small, sharp anchor in a sea of degradation. With quiet dignity, she bent down, the fabric of her uniform straining as she began to wipe the puddle with a cloth. Wang Shuing leaned down, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for her. Don't forget who's paying for your mother's hospital bills. Kiki. That life support machine is expensive. Your compliance keeps it switched on. He straightened up, his shadow looming over her. But cleaning floors won't be enough for long. Sooner or later, you're going to have to crawl into my bed if you want her to keep breathing. The vile threat was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She froze, her hand trembling over the wet floor. This was the true price of her loyalty. Just then, the glass doors slid open again. Wang Jia stepped into the lobby. He had come to reclaim his office, but stopped dead, his entire being locking on to the scene before him. He saw Kiki, his most loyal assistant, on her hands and knees. He saw his stepbrother, Wang Shuing, standing over her like a triumphant conqueror, a smug, cruel smile on his face. He saw the spilled water, the snickering sycophants, and the crushing weight of humiliation pressing down on the one person who had never abandoned him. A cold, silent fury began to boil in his veins. It was the protective rage of Wang Jinhua, sharpened by the raw energy of a young man's body. The game was no longer just about reclaiming a corporation. It was about avenging the innocent. The lobby's polished marble floor reflected the ugly sneer on the associate's face. His hand was still clamped on Kiki's arm, his voice a venomous whisper meant for everyone to hear. Still clinging to this useless puppet, he can't even protect himself, let alone you. Before Kiki could wrench her arm free, a blur of motion cut through the air. The first slap was a crack of thunder in the cavernous space, sharp and absolute. The associate's head snapped to the side, a red bloom instantly appearing on his cheek. The second slap followed, just as swift, just as brutal, on the other side. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Wang Jia stood before them, his posture no longer that of a hesitant boy but of an executioner. His eyes, cold and dark, held the man's stunned gaze. The first, Zhou's voice was low and resonant, carrying an authority that vibrated through the floor. Was for daring to lay a hand on an employee of Zongyuan Group. He took a deliberate step closer, his presence expanding to fill the space. The second was a down payment for the betrayals of the man who holds your leash. He paused, letting the words hang like a sentence. As for challenging a shareholder, a dismissive, chilling smile touched his lips. You're not important enough for a third. Kiki stared, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't the quiet, wounded young man she cared for. This was a king reclaiming his throne. In the sharp line of his jaw, the unyielding fire in his eyes, she saw the ghost of the legendary Wang Jinhua, the grandfather whose spirit now inhabited this vessel. She wasn't just stunned, she was breathless, witnessing the birth of a titan. Zhou's gaze flickered to the head of security, who was hurrying over. "You," he commanded, his voice slicing through the silence. "This man is to be removed from the premises. His employment with Zongyuan Group is terminated, effective immediately. Pack his things and have them sent to whatever gutter he crawls back to." The associate sputtered, a mixture of rage and disbelief contorting his features. "You can't do that. Only Director Wang can." "I just did." Zhou cut him off, turning his back on the man as if he had ceased to exist. He extended a hand to Kiki, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Are you all right?" She could only nod, her mind reeling. He then looked to Wang Shui, his loyal general. "It's time." Together, the three of them marched toward the grand mahogany doors of the main conference room. Two guards, loyal to the new regime, stepped forward to block their path, arms crossed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wang," one said, avoiding Zhou's eyes. "Director Wang Shuing and Madame Yan Liu have given explicit instructions. You are no longer welcome at this meeting." Wang Shu stepped forward, his briefcase held like a shield. "On what grounds, my client, Wang Zhou, is the legal inheritor of Wang Jinhua's 35% stake in this company. He is the single largest shareholder. Denying him entry is a violation of corporate law." The guards hesitated, their resolve faltering. Zhou didn't wait for them to decide. He simply pushed past them, the guards stumbling back, unwilling to physically restrain the grandson of the man they had all once revered. He shoved the heavy doors open, and the hushed, tense atmosphere of the shareholders' meeting shattered. Every head in the room swiveled. At the head of the long table, Wang Shuing shot to his feet, his face pale with shock. Beside him, Yan Liu's perfectly composed expression cracked, a flicker of pure panic in her eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" "Security," Wang Shuing roared. Zhou strode into the room, Kiki and Wang Shui flanking him, his presence sucking all the air out. He walked with a predator's grace, his eyes scanning the faces of the board members, men and women who had built their careers under his grandfather's watch. "Settle down, Shuing." Zhou's voice was calm, yet it silenced the room. "You wouldn't want to cause a scene." "Not today." He stopped near the foot of the table, a stark counterpoint to his step-uncle at its head. "Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the interruption. I'm sure my dear step-grandmother, Yan Liu, and my ambitious uncle, Wang Shuing, have been painting a very specific picture for you. One of a stable transition, one of a new era." He let the words sink in, his gaze locking onto Yan Liu. But they left out a few key details. For instance, the unfortunate accident that befell my grandfather, Wang Jinhua. An accident they orchestrated. Murmurs erupted around the table. Yan Liu stood, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "This is slander." The boy is clearly unwell, confused by his grief. "Am I?" Zhou countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Was I also confused when you and your son systematically forged documents to transfer my grandfather's personal assets? Or when you paid off doctors to ensure I remained in a vegetative state so you could act as my proxy?" Wang Shui stepped forward and opened his briefcase, methodically placing folders in front of the lead shareholders. Inside, you will find copies of the original asset reports, the forged transfer deeds, bank statements showing payments to a certain Dr. Shen, and a sworn affidavit from a nurse who witnessed Madame Yan attempting to tamper with Mr. Zhou's life support. The room descended into chaos. Shareholders flipped through the pages, their faces a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The evidence was irrefutable. Yan Liu sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Wang Shuing stood frozen, his elaborate deception crumbling around him. In that moment, the board members weren't looking at a boy. They were looking at the spitting image of Wang Jinhua in his prime, calculating, ruthless, and utterly in control. I believe it is time for a new vote, Zhou announced, his voice ringing with finality. A vote to remove Yan Liu and Wang Shuing from their executive positions and from this board, effective immediately. He held up his own hand. I cast my 35%. Wang Shu's phone buzzed. He put it on speaker. Long Yi, on behalf of the Azure Dragon Consortium, casts our 15% in favor of Mr. Wang Zhou's motion. Another board member, an old man who had been a loyal friend of his grandfather, raised a trembling hand. I cast my 5% with Zhou. One by one, hands went up, a cascade of support that washed away the last vestiges of Yan Liu's power. The majority was overwhelming. It was a slaughter. Wang Shuing stared, defeated, his empire turned to dust in a matter of minutes. Yan Liu looked at Zhou, not with anger, but with a chilling fear, as if she were seeing a ghost. Kiki watched, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective pride. He had done it. He had avenged his grandfather and reclaimed his birthright. With the vote concluded, Wang Zhou walked calmly to the head of the table. He didn't ask Wang Shuing to move. He simply stood there, waiting, humiliated and broken. His uncle stumbled away from the chair. Zhou took his place, the leather sighing under his weight as he settled into the seat of power. He rested his hands on the polished wood, a confident, knowing smile playing on his lips. A new era for Zongyuan Group had just begun.